We'll take a little respite from the baseball and basketball and some NFL. 3-point stance because the graphic by Michelle is awesome. Of course, Amal Shah. You've got the big guy, Dustin Swedelson. I'm Patrick Meagher. Quickly on this, I don't know if you both heard this, but Florio was on with McAfee, and he said, quote, not many dominoes have to fall for Lamar Jackson to sit out this year. Okay, so if he sits out, he would miss out if that franchise is picked up, of course, on $32 million. That is the Le'Veon Bell route. I don't think he's going to go there, and I'll tell you why. But just quickly, Lamar Jackson, and again, it's early, Amal Shah and Dustin. The draft hasn't even happened. Many teams that are quarterback needy, their process could change. But let's be clear. There are no teams aggressively pursuing him right now. We would have heard about the offer sheet being signed, right? And maybe teams believe if they do offer that the Ravens will snap call, so they don't want to do the legwork for the Ravens. I think you guys can understand what I'm saying there. Peter King says the Ravens may not get him to play at 32 mils. So those are two sources that are pretty connected that essentially are saying that Lamar Jackson could sit out. Here's the thing. Don't do this if you're Lamar Jackson, and here's why. If he sits out, he's going to be then 4 years removed from his MVP season. He's going to have missed 10 games the last 2 seasons, so that's a lot of ball to have missed over 3 seasons. The perception if he sits out about Lamar Jackson, which is glowing right now, will completely change. He'll turn into this selfish martyr that he doesn't want. He's got a new offensive coordinator there with Monken with the Ravens, so if he does end up back with the Ravens, he's only hurting himself by putting himself back another year. Again, he could have signed a 3-year offer from the Ravens that was 44 on average and 133 guaranteed, the 3-year deal. So he's kind of done this to himself. And we know what's mucked the whole process. Deshaun Watson getting the, $250 million guaranteed. But this is DeMaurice Smith, who's the head of the NFLPA. I think they're puppeteering Lamar Jackson a little bit. He doesn't have representation like you've talked about, and it's very important, Amal, for him to do so. And I think they're using him as a martyr. I think they're saying the benchmark has been set with Deshaun Watson. Don't take any less. You're going to hurt those people following you. I think Jackson has an ego. I think Jackson has some pride and principle, but I also believe there's people behind him. We've heard of some names behind him kind of pulling strings. And frankly, I think the NFLPA, and remember, the NFLPA and the owners hate each other. They're adversaries. This is a brutal situation going on right now. I won't use the word collusion, but it's going to get nasty. And if Jackson sits out and doesn't pick up that 32 mil on the franchise tender, I think it's a huge mistake.
I agree with everything you said. I want to address a couple of things. I think the first mistake started by not hiring an agent. Look, I don't think you necessarily have to have an agent, but I thought in this situation, if he had one, it would have gotten done. You mentioned the 3 years, $144 million deal. You know me, Patrick. I'm a guy that kind of looks at everything risk versus reward situation in life. To me, you take the 133, you play the 3 years, and if you perform at the level you did when you were an MVP or comparable to it, you would have gotten a $200 to $300 million deal on the backside of that. He would have only been around 27, 28 years old. I feel like he's overplayed his hand, and I think he's starting to see that the league maybe doesn't value him as a quarterback the way the Ravens did, or maybe he sees himself, and this has been a colossal mistake. And I thought you brought up one point that can't be overlooked. Very important. I love the Le'Veon Bell comp. And the other thing is, if he sits out, I think there becomes a stigma or an image that, hey, I'm about me. I'm about the money. And I get everybody being about money. Trust me, there's nobody who's a more capitalist than me. But at the end of the day, when you're making the kind of money they're making in the NFL, it gives a bad overall vibe to people. And I think this is so important that you raise that point. I think he's got to play somewhere. This is interesting. Now, from Lamar's perspective, I can appreciate his frustration. Deshaun Watson, the sexual harasser himself, gets a guaranteed contract for $240 or whatever it was, and you're not even able to get half of that, or you're not getting the kind of guaranteed money you want. Again, I can see where he's coming from. But if people say Deshaun Watson is better, fair. I don't have a problem with that. I just feel like he has overplayed his hand, and it's hurt him long term. He should have paid the money on the agent, should have negotiated a deal and said, listen, I'll give you 1% of whatever you get. Okay, $1.3 million, $1.33 on $133 million. Nobody wants to part with that kind of money. But, Patrick, you are so right. This is done. We're not even talking about this.
Perception in vocation and in life matters. Yep. And if he sits out to this year, one of the best guys in sports automatically turns into a selfish guy that nobody wants to touch. And again, if he sits out, that's 4 years from the unanimous MVP. He missed a bunch of games. You don't want to miss out on the ball. We saw Deshaun Watson come back and play miserably last year for the Browns because he had missed season on top of season. I think it's a terrible look if he does sit out. I think the way you put it, he overplayed his hand, is perfect. We'll throw up the market, and then we'll get to the big guy with the other stories here on 3-point stance. Right now, if it's not the Ravens, the Colts 2.5 to 1 are your favorites to land Jackson. The Falcons are 3 to 1. They've tightened up a little bit there. They were 3.5 to 1 the last time I looked at this board. 4.5 to 1 for the Commanders. I can assure you the Commanders are not signing Lamar Jackson. Don't waste your money. The Dolphins aren't either. The Lions aren't either. It's either the Colts, the Falcons, the Patriots could be in the mix, but the Commanders aren't doing it. The Dolphins aren't doing it, and the Lions aren't doing it. Let's go to the big guy.
Yeah,
what do you got for us?
A couple notes from Jeremy Fowler that he reported earlier in the week. It's not that Jackson wants the fully guaranteed deal that Watson got. He just wants near the $230 million guaranteed that Watson got. Another note from Fowler in his latest report is that the Ravens seem to be the team that's most interested in him, for whatever that's worth, is what he said. And then finally, this is an interesting tidbit because it lets you know what the Ravens were thinking a little while ago. JoeBucksFan.com with a report that the Ravens actually made an offer to Baker Mayfield before he signed with Tampa Bay.
I tell you what,
Ball, you raised your hand.
Yeah, to me, and I go back to the Richard Seymour trade from the Patriots to the Raiders. When they traded the future Hall of Famer away, and that was when I realized if a team who drafts you, develops you, and then eventually moves on from you, the player generally does not have that much left in the tank. There are some exceptions to the rule. But if the Ravens are willing to re-sign him, which is a good sign for Lamar, that bodes well. However, I think outside of Baltimore, I'm a huge John Harbaugh fan. I think he does a tremendous job, not only as a coach, managing the game, but player personalities and disposition. But they didn't put the franchise. They put the what was the tag they put on him? Not the full franchise tag where they get
transition tag.
Well, he gets $32 million because the franchise tag, you're supposed to get the top 5 salaries at your position on the average. And here,
right, it's the
non-exclusive. Non-exclusive. I'm sorry, non-exclusive.
Exactly.
Yeah. And to me, that says a lot about how they view you. Don't you think so?
Well, here's the thing. If I'm dating someone and I want to break up with her, but she's the only one that wants me and nobody else out there in the market want me, I have zero leverage and I'm hurting my leverage. So I might as well just go to counseling with Shorty and see if we can make it work because we're all going to die one day anyway.
I love the analogy.
The tone felt a little too real in that one.
When keeping it real goes wrong.
Trust me, I'm good. Single and good.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.